Welcome to week 2 of the course. Posting this introduction to week 2 a little bit early, actually module 2 of the course. It is March 10th and just another beautiful day out. So nice to see the snow disappear and to see the green come out. A little bit of humor here to kick off this fireside chat. The first one is every Sunday night in our neighborhood, you put out your garbage bin, which is green, and you put out your recycling bin, which is blue. And I should say every Sunday night. Every Sunday night the garbage goes out. And recycling is every other week. This past week I put both of them out. And I got up and went to work Monday morning, and I looked up and down the street, and I'm like, I'm the only one that put the recycling bin out today. And then I realized, yes, last week was recycling, and I did put the bin out then too. But then I started to wonder a little bit what my neighbors were thinking, because I'm guessing somewhere along the line there were some discussions like, do you know that they've got their recycling out today? Has there been a change in the city schedule? Is there a holiday coming up here this week that we don't know about? And they've lived there for 13 years, so if they've got it out there, it's probably recycling. So should we put ours out or not? But nope, no one else was going to be safe. They all knew it wasn't recycling day, so it just sat out there and got pulled in at the end of the day. When I check my Gmail, it's funny because in promotions, you always get these advertisements, and one I get is from LL Bean, and I have tried to unsubscribe to LL Bean several times. I have nothing against the company. I purchased something apparently from them one time years ago, and I receive catalogs and just inundated with emails. So I'm like, okay, no, I don't need a pair of socks to go with a shirt that I bought in 1984. I'm pretty good with where I'm at right now. If I need you, LL Bean, I know where to find you. But it's I was notified here by my computer, well, actually by my printer, that the yellow ink is running low. Which I suppose I appreciate, and it kind of gives you that your ink is low, you don't have to worry about it at the moment. I'm just letting you know. And by the way, we can log on to Hewlett-Packard online, and you can order replacement yellow ink. And I'm thinking, yeah, and I can also just go to my Walmart, which is very close to my house, and buy the ink without the postage and other things. But just thought that was kind of funny, all these options. Like, I want to make sure we got you covered here in case you got some big project coming up. I'm like, oh. I checked, and there's still quite a bit of yellow ink, and I don't do a lot of things in yellow. So if it's black ink, it's a little more urgent, but I'm okay. Hewlett-Packard printers, so we are all right. And finally, these new vehicles that have the Wi-Fi hotspots. I don't know if you've encountered this or not, but I'll put my cell phone in its charger, and I'll have it sitting in one of my cup holders when I'm driving to and from work, and be driving down the interstate, and then all of a sudden you'll get up next to someone, and the phone lights up and it says Wi-Fi connection available. And I'm like, this person's got Wi-Fi right next to me. I'm like, okay, how not a bad deal here. But then they pull off on the exit, and then the Wi-Fi is gone. But then, appears again somebody else, and you kind of look over and you're like, all right, buddy, like how long here? You got another 20, 30 minutes on this ride? We can stay together. I can get the free Wi-Fi and maybe listen to a little music, stream to, through the old cell phone there, so I don't have to pay the extra charges. But anyway, I get such a kick out of it now that these Wi-Fi spots that are portable are just getting picked up all the time. as I'm driving. So from other vehicles that have it. So it's crazy, but and that's it. Just a little humor to start out in our module 2. Few shout outs. Aaron, great job with posting about innate needs and mentioning test scores and the emphasis put on test scores, and that kind of covers up everything else that needs to be addressed, such as innate needs, mental health issues, so forth. It just becomes test scores. Thankfully, that is changing somewhat under the Every Student Succeeds Act. That's has the ability to change where a school could have an indicator of professional growth, which could be something other than test scores. It could be like ratings on school culture or the Youth Risk Behavior Survey or something. But the hitch on that is that's what the feds say. The state can come up with its own rules on that. So, but yeah, it's too bad. And the other thing is, I read an article not too long ago just how much kids miss, physically, biologically miss recess, and what it does for a body, and just strengthening bones and joints and kind of resetting the body to learn. And it's sad that we are losing out on that too. But I want to point out, Maddie wrote about innate needs and highlighted that teachers and teaching various teaching staff they're always helping out kids, whether it be snacks or if it's clothing. I mean, teachers are extremely generous, and that is so true, and just I think a compliment to all of us as educators, the heart and the compassion. And what that means to students, they'll remember that years and years and years from now. I mean, if you were helping them out, gave them some fish crackers a couple times, if they were late to school in the morning, or if it was a pen, or even if you bought them a soda or something like that, it's these things. Which we look at, and it's meeting innate needs. And once you can meet those innate needs, and those are really basic. Once you meet those, then you start getting into giving the child a sense of control over their environment. And then also, once you have that done, then you can put in your PBIS program. But what happens is schools sometimes will put in their PBIS programs, but they don't take care of innate needs first. And so PBIS isn't very effective then. And I've seen that in a number of schools. So, you have a school that students might really be struggling. You're thinking, well, we need PBIS. We need to demonstrate, the expectations for X, Y, and Z behaviors. But, you're not realizing that student didn't have anything to eat this morning, or, their tooth is sore and they haven't had any dental. So, for them, that's the urgent part in their life right now. And the how to stand in line for the bus or whatever isn't probably at the top of their lists. But PBIS definitely is important, but it follows innate needs. Also, Maddie, thanks for mentioning tolerance versus acceptance. That is a big point I wanted to make during week 1. Go for acceptance. Tolerance is just it's a basement level approach to inclusion. And Sarah, you talked about the WEAC article and mentioned the court cases. And really, court cases, that's the way that our procedures get dictated. It's the Congress will write a law, and then it takes a couple challenges in court before you really define what this means or what this doesn't mean. And I never knew that until I got into administration in education. You interpret it the best you can, and then eventually you look and say, well, how did the Seventh Circuit Court interpret this, and things like that. But kind of funny how some of that stuff works, because when you think rolls out and it's ready to go, but it's really not ready to go until it's been through the fire a few times with some legal cases, and then it really gets defined of what it is, whatever the piece of legislation is. And thank you for putting a very positive spin on behavior plans. I appreciate that. Behavior plans have a huge role in inclusion and in student success, and they have evolved significantly. Behavior plans in the early days did seem to be more exclusionary in nature. Would have things written in like, if the student does not swear for 20 consecutive days, then they will be able to return to the classroom for an hour or something like that. That's an exaggeration, but all of these conditions would be built in that were basically traps to keep the student from coming back. And thanks for pointing out that you're describing a school that's evolved beyond that. So let's do a week 1 recap. First of all, good start. Everybody got in, posted your bio. You've been active posters. Keep it up. Keep posting to the threads. Just for the fact that it's so much more intriguing when all of us can log in and read, maybe if there's 6, 7, 8 posts that are underneath one thread, different people's opinions. I'm not telling you have to go in and make 4 posts a day or something like that, but it really just builds on the class, so you get out of it what you put into it. And I will continue to post too, but we don't, if we just have 1 or 2 responses, it gets to be it's not a very vibrant class when that happens. A class I just got done instructing, sometimes we would have threads that would easily go 10 responses or more. But that was a little bit of a bigger class too. So good start, good start. And make sure that you continue to check the class on a fairly regular basis. I do post announcements, and you will be able to see in your module when things are due. From your bios, wow, you live very fascinating, interesting lives, and I do not. So I'm very happy to read about all of your stories and kind of live vicariously through your experiences. My excitement usually comes from bike rides or with my daughters at the playground or something like that. But I do run every night pretty much about 10 or 11 o'clock for about an hour. The high school track is located 2 blocks from my house, so it's a safe place to run. You're not going to have a car jump out there and get you. So, but that's something I've done. I shouldn't say I've always done, but for probably the last 3 years. So. And the night can be really fascinating and beautiful when you have clear sky, all of the stars are shining, and it's quieter, and so there's something really kind of special about that too. Make sure you're completing your checklist for week 1, and then you'll see your weekly checklist, because your points for the class do come off of that checklist. It's not a lot, but somebody just recently had like a 99.4 or something, and they asked me, well, why didn't I have 100? And I had to go back and say, well, on this one checklist you didn't complete whatever. So just make sure you complete the checklist, which is basically just checking a box that you have read the article or whatever. We did talk about mainstreaming during week 1. As I say this, it's right here at the end of, as we wrap up our first week. We still have this issue where we have used to be No Child Left Behind, just got renamed and updated a couple months ago, but now it's the Every Student Succeeds Act. And we have that over here, which is the Milky Way, and then over here is the Andromeda, and they're both solar systems, and the Andromeda represents IDEA. So we have IDEA and ESSA, and they're going to collide, and there's going to be this massive turmoil. The good news is that's not going to be for billions and billions of years as far as the galaxies. The bad news is that's probably going to happen really fast here for NCLB and Every Student Succeeds. So I don't know what that's going to look like. And here's the collision. Every Student Succeeds Act wants full inclusion. Continues off of where No Child Left Behind left off on that. And then IDEA, Individuals with Disability Education Act, wants schools to offer a range of services, certainly to start with always considering the regular education classroom as the default placement, and then if you can add accommodations for student success, that's great. If not, maybe then you have to look at splitting into a special education setting, or all the way to if it has to be a off-site setting. But you have this range. So IDEA means you have the range. So even if you're a full inclusion district, technically you still have to have options for students, and that beyond just the regular classroom. So if you have a student, for example, who's very medically fragile, let's say that's the instance, or has a here's a great example: student that has a very severe anxiety disability, so under other health impaired. That student can't be in the school. They actually, physically, they shake and become ill. So what you do then, I've been through this a couple times. We set up a monitor at the child's home, monitor in the child's school, and the child kind of is able to watch their classroom. Classroom can watch at certain times, and then you try to get closer and closer where you can get the child back into the school for a few hours, and eventually expand that. But in that case, well, that's not full inclusion, but that's the way that the needs needed to be met for that child. There was no way to bring that child into the classroom, and that was a physician had written that out too. But just indicating, when you say full inclusion, that's a little bit misleading, because you still under IDEA have to have a range of services. But full inclusion, I think, does have a mindset though of we're going to do everything we can to meet the needs of the students and keep them in our classrooms, and then also in our schools. The goal of public education, Katie, you mentioned curiosity as being part of that, and I like that you put that down, because we're kind of at this stage where we don't foster curiosity or innovation in kids as much as we used to, and we don't. If we have failure becomes stigmatized. So if you fail on something, that's really bad. Well, so what we do is we create IEPs, or we create grading plans that completely eliminate failure. Well, everybody has to learn to deal with failure, and failure does not have to be a bad thing. If I go out and I'm going to learn to play basketball, and I can only make 2 out of 10 shots, am I a failure? And I practice more, and now I can make 5 out of 10. So did I meet a criteria? Did I show growth? I mean, it's just, and you look back in history, all of the inventions of different things, all of the models, the prototypes that didn't work, and hundreds that just ended up. But you learned from every one of those experiences to finally get to the example that worked. And I think you could go through almost any industry and find that. So yeah, curiosity, definitely. I remember being as a kid, I don't know, maybe 4th, 5th grade, and our teacher brought in a sack, and it had all different types of things in it, a metal bar and some tape and some Legos and whatever, but everybody had basically kind of like the same stuff. And it was stuff I think she just kind of put together. And then we were put in the groups of like 3 or 4, and we were given a couple hours to then use this to invent something. It didn't matter what you made. And so we came up with the coolest things. I mean, and it could be something, futuristic or something practical. And but wow, problem solving in motion, and just curiosity to see what can we do with this, or we can actually turn this into this if we do this. And I still remember that, and wow, what a great learning experience. You think back, and I actually, if I was in that classroom, that school doesn't exist anymore. I could even tell you where I was sitting, like when we were doing this project. It was just soaking it in that much. Also, there was talk in week 1 about goal setting. That was mentioned in a post, and it's very important. students need agency in a sense of purpose. And that's much different today than it was in the past when, students would come home and, half of the students lived on a farm, so you'd have chores to do. If you did, live in the city, there were, other things you were, doing at night, or there were, yard chores or things like this. Well, in my community, more people live in apartments, more students than live in homes. So if you're coming, home to an apartment, you're not having those types of things that are helping to give you purpose and agency. So those could be obtained in other ways. Unfortunately, one of the ways is through, too much time on social media. But when you help students set goals, to look to the future, whether it be a year from now, a couple of years, 2 weeks from now, they become so much more academically productive and then also socially productive. Believe it or not, it is very difficult for youth to set goals today, even if it is a few weeks out. It's extremely hard. And I think it comes back to that sense of agency and purpose and understanding where they are and where they kind of fit in society and what they want to do and what they the challenges that they want to take on. It's very cloudy. It's very cloudy, and I think a lot of them too see, just weird things in the media, or we have some very different family dynamics than we had years ago. But thank you for pointing that out. Week 2. So as we look ahead to week 2 or module 2, the progression of inclusion timeline. That is an assignment that you have, and I believe there's a couple examples that are posted, or at least one example I think is posted, but you will take different points. I think it's 12 or 15. It's described. Different points in time and describe inclusion along those points. So, for example, if you were to talk about inclusion of students in sports, you might go to, in 1898 there was the first wheelchair basketball team. I'm just making this up, but and then in 1925 there was whatever, a student or a person with a disability allowed to be in the Olympics, and then and this year schools started Title IX, which removed discrimination, so you could have boys sports and girls sports, and then eventually Special Olympics came in. I mean, so you could do that. You could do it through legislation. You could do it through ADA, saying here's how buildings have changed over the years to have more access. You could do it through anything: school buses, cafeterias, curriculums. Go for it, whatever you want to pick. But look at, somehow put on a frame, put those lenses on of how you're going to look at school, and you can look at, I guess, society as a whole, because school's going to be part of that, and youth, but look at how inclusion has changed in society and get a starting point and bring it up as far as you want. If you bring it up to current time, or if you have a point before this where you stop. We're just talking about the United States. We're not talking worldwide or anything like that, but it'll be fun. You'll figure out what you want to do, and then you can start doing your research. And the assignment example that I posted, really, you can do a PowerPoint, you can do a Prezi. There's other ways to do that. I think there's a site called timetoast.com where you can put in different points on a timeline. You can do it as a narrative, but make sure if you do that, you just make sure you put the dates down. And this isn't something that's going to take you hours to do, and you don't have to write pages and pages. But if you write something about, here's a court case, write at least a 2-sentence summary of what it was. If it's if it's on a slide, give a little explanation of what it is. But yeah, other than that, and maybe technology. Think about that. The first computer that had voice recognition, or the first laptop, whatever it could be. I don't know. There's just so many things. But look at the example. That'll give you an idea. You'll post it, and then you'll respond to other people's timelines. So look at their timelines and highlight, give feedback to them. And so I will also ultimately, be going through, and I'll be assigning a grade. The grade you will see in your grade book, nobody else sees your grade, so don't worry about that. And I typically do grades about every 2 weeks in this class. So just if you go into the grade book and you don't see anything posted, check back to announcements. If I don't have any announcements that I have updated grades, then I haven't updated grades. If it doesn't default to a 0, so there would just be nothing in there if I haven't entered anything yet. If there's a 0 in there, yeah, then we'd have to talk, because not many people have earned a 0 on anything in this class, although it has happened. Mostly just because they don't follow the directions. You're going to be introduced to Rho Vargo during Module 2. Extremely inspirational. And I don't want to say any more than that, but Rho is going to rock your world. I want to also caution you, so we're talking about the history of inclusion. We think of civil rights and serving people with disabilities, that we've evolved and have been kind of where we're at for maybe like 50, 60 years or more. But all you have to do is look up Pennhurst, and it was a facility for students with mental health needs and behavioral needs, operated well into the 1980s under some pretty horrific conditions. And you can go on YouTube and do various searches and find a number of documentaries about facilities that operated into the 80s, which would have students, that autism and other things. And back in 1980, autism wasn't identified as autism. It was a mental, some type of, mental health condition. And so it's weird, because I'm thinking, I'm watching some of this stuff and I'm like, I was in school at that time. I mean, I'm watching kids in this video and I'm like, I was the same age as that kid back in 1982 or whatever it was. So yeah, we've made some great fast steps forward, but we have to be very careful that we preserve that, because back then places like Pennhurst, that was the other. That's where the other went. And people with disabilities, special needs, behavioral, whatever, they quickly became the other. So we have to make sure that we don't ever revert to something like that. Again, not that long ago, a number of us probably can look at those videos and timeline ourselves as being in school when some of these things like Pennhurst were happening. And the last thing is, and I talked about this a little bit earlier, but I'm defending my dissertation at UW-Madison on May 2nd, so coming up. And then one of the things, though, that I've seen in my research, and I also do safety consulting, but one of the things that I'm seeing is, we talk about test scores, but one of the things also is mental health needs. There's a perception that they're increasing. And I say perception, not denying that they are increasing, but there really is not an objective way to do a measurement on that. Versus, you can do a youth risk behavior survey, but that's not a mental health assessment. So what's happening, I think, is true mental health needs of students are getting kind of pushed under that PBIS umbrella. And it's kind of like, okay, this student might have depression or might be bipolar or is cutting and other things. And we are going to reshape our PBIS to help address that. And that doesn't work, because PBIS is not designed to have that type of service provision. Now, schools are having more mental health services coming into the school, which is a good thing. And that also does have some pitfalls. One is the schools that I talk to that do that will almost always say it's not enough. And what happens then is, that somebody steps in and treats the child a couple times a week, and then the child's back in the classroom. And for the counties, you got to really kind of watch what goes on, because if the county is putting some money out there and saying, we're going to provide part-time or full-time mental health counselors at your school. Does that mean then the county is no longer going to support a placement, a mental health placement for a student at Winnebago, for example? Because Mendota's in Madison starting to get out of that. So in essence, is the county kind of saying this is a less expensive way for us to keep the needs in the school and out of the county realm? It's really the county's responsibility to make sure that their citizens' mental health needs are met. But just some observations on that as we talk about inclusion, that everybody at the table has a little bit of a different perception. And I wanted just to bring up that part of the county, because it is something we're seeing much more with mental health, people coming in to schools. And part of that is saying, then the student can be included. They don't have to be out of school in a facility. And also if the parent picks them up and has to drive them an hour and a half for a treatment, then they're not going to probably bring them back that day. So if we can come in and do the mental health therapies, we're keeping that child in the environment and they're getting the education. So a lot of different kind of opinions go back and forth on that, and whether that's really inclusion or whether that is serving a different purpose. So I've talked a lot. These will usually be 20 to 30 minutes, but this is a fireside chat. This one is for week 2, module 2, which is coming up, and we'll start. Actually, let me check my old calendar here. Module 2 begins on I believe the 14th. So yeah. So anyway, we've got the date, but I'm posting this a little bit early for you. So typically, I know a lot of you take advantage of your weekends to work ahead on things. So that's why I'm opening up the module, and I'll always do that. I'll open it up before the weekend, so you can look and know what you have for the upcoming week, because as teachers, you never know what's on your agenda for professional development, or is this testing week, or is this SLO week, or PLC week, or whatever it is. But so anyway, you've been wonderful with posting, and the depth of the experiences you've brought and how you are weaving those into the post, that's tremendous. And just wait until we start to get into the next few weeks, where I think you really get to tap into your experience and then bring that out into the questions that we have. And again, enjoy the timeline and don't be spending hours and hours on it, but also feel free to go off the beaten path and go with something totally out there. It's, that's different. Or you don't. It's up to you. So have a good rest of your day. For me, it is, again, it's Thursday, the 10th of March, 2016. And I am just about to wrap up and do a little bit of proofreading on some of my Ph.D. stuff. So, all right, everybody. Again, thank you for being just wonderful students to kick off this class. And I hope you liked my humor at the start, because you're going to get it every module, and I'm not sure I'm going to get to be a better comedian than what I'm at right now. So, all right. Take care. Thank you.